Thank you, René, for that nice introduction. So, hello and welcome from my side as well. Just a short notification. We had the same idea. Whoopala, sorry, not switching slides yet. Yes, we had the same idea with the contact information. As we're like talkative, we want to get into contact with you personally, so we forgot to put our contact information on the first slide already. Actually, we're like, I hope it's understandable. Actually, we're like 3 people, and Daniel is not able to be here today because he's currently presenting at UbiCamp in Asia. And my name is Rainhard Findling, and Muhammad Muaaz, my colleague, is going to do the second talk, as we are going to present a combined effort of our lab, or at least a part of our lab here today. Yeah, so what are we going to talk about today? Hopefully that thing works. Yes. We're going to talk about a very similar topic as the one that we have just seen. We are going to focus on user-friendly mobile security, and we are going to do that in an Android framework where we try to combine different authentication mechanisms into one, maybe like ideally invisible and not observable approach. And the special thing about it is we are going to focus on continuous authentication at some point. We're going to focus on being cross-device, so involving multiple devices. And we're going to focus on risk awareness. So we're going to talk about all of these in detail later. So, okay, the short introduction. I think I don't need to really introduce why security is important in mobile devices. We store many important details today, and it is we're in big troubles if we lose those devices or anybody else gets access to it if we're unlucky. And the impact of security is something that we just heard. It's if security and usability did not work together, and the usability of the security that we need is too low, people are just not going to use it. So no security is of no use, of course, even if the security would be high and people deactivate it. So we see that all the time, basically, with people deactivating their locking mechanisms on mobile devices. We see people just for convenience storing lots of possibly private data in the cloud, which if you have the NSA in your threat model is possibly not the best idea. We also see like disabled encryption mechanisms simply because people don't want to memorize different passwords or don't have the possibility of memorizing very long passwords and typing them very often. It's just a hassle. So there is a very huge need for easier to use mobile device security in basically all directions. So what we are going to contribute here, as a research lab, USMAL, that's one of the labs that is organizing that event here. We are contributing everything that is focusing on the combination of usability and security as far as we are able to afford it in manpower terms. And we are dealing with authentication. That's the topic we're talking about now. But we're also dealing about hardware security. We are also including virtualization, secure elements. We're also analyzing malware at some point. So if you're interested in any of these topics in specific, just approach us and have a nice chat. It's also like one of the important topics that our organizer already mentioned at the beginning. The digital ID is something that's coming up in the future. That's all stuff that we are covering in our lab. Yeah, so especially to our topic in authentication, we are pretty heavily focusing on biometrics, which, yeah, everybody has it. We have lots of them, and we can use them very intelligent if we're lucky. And sometimes we focus on unconventional approaches. That's cool because it possibly enables new stuff. And especially what we're currently doing, that's not a stuff that's important for today, is our new framework that we are basically in the design phase. Now it's research in progress, we already have stuff, but lots of it is to come. And that's stuff that we want to talk about today, and we will be glad for input. We call it CORMORANT, and basically it's a framework that combines the risk awareness, cross-device, multi-device, and the biometric approaches into one framework. The goal is to have different plugins. Every researcher can easily that's actually the point. Easily develop new approaches where you have your biometrics or also like your conventional security like PIN or password and include it into the framework. So we want to reduce the effort on the one side of developing new things and trying it out and evaluating it on mobile devices. And the second thing is we want to combine all these so that security at some point becomes rather transparent for the user, so that there is no real deficit on maybe having like a fingerprint or having your password. The goal is also to have the framework possibly just trigger you in case you want to do banking and there is some higher security required. Then it just triggers you and says, you are authenticated already, but the confidence that it's really you is a bit too low for do banking. So please just provide something else, and maybe you can choose, maybe you don't have the possibility to choose. It all depends on the situation. Also for your understanding, all these plugins, currently it's designed like if you have a PIN or password plugin, usually you get a true or false decision, but with biometrics we can say it's confidence that it's you, maybe 60% or maybe 30%, and combining these different biometrics we can accumulate that confidence, and it also makes it a bit harder to attack because maybe an attacker has to break 3 such layers in the future instead of 1 only. Okay, so the cost security trade-off that we had at the beginning. I think it's also pretty well known, depending on the situation, you need different approaches. It's like if you have a 2-factor authentication, that's more secure than only having 1 factor, but maybe at very, very, very high security things, you need something more than 2-factor authentication even. And it all depends on the situation. So it depends basically on the situation, which includes the risk of somebody else posing as you or somebody else trying to get into that system. And this is basically where things start to get interesting because it depends on the probability of somebody trying to attack you, which could, for example, be expressed at the time. If you're at home and your device is assumed to be next to you, it's not moving, then possibly an attack is a bit less probably than if you're on the bus and moving and possibly somebody just stole your device. Same with combines location already, my example. The same is with strangers nearby. Imagine you have face authentication and the camera detects other people in the background, then it's possibly not very safe to enter your banking PIN, so that somebody could do shoulder surfing and see your thumb go over the screen and just catch your 4-digit banking PIN. The same is possible, for example, with voice authentication. If we hear other people talking, we could derive that you're possibly in an environment with different people standing right next to you, where, for example, speaking your secret password or speaking your voice at all for voice recognition without having a special phrase would maybe not be the safest approach. And of course the impact, in case you have your banking application opened, maybe the impact is a bit bigger if somebody steals the device with the opened bank application, then somebody just steals the device which is currently locked. So the impact also influences how we can handle all these mechanisms in one framework. It's of course also possible if you have different devices, if we think of the cross-device approach, maybe one device is more valuable than another one because it has more access to sensitive data. Especially interesting for people in important positions. If you maybe steal the watch at the beginning, it might not be a problem, but if you steal it in maybe 5 years or currently steal the mobile device, which is not locked, the person could be in huge trouble. Okay, so how do we think we could approach that? We think about having that confidence and that risk as a continuous value over time, and in case like think of gate authentication, so you are authenticated while walking, you have the device in the pocket and you walk and your gate is recognized. Over time, as you walk, the device is getting more and more confident that it's really you. So you may be able to just pull it out of your pocket and use it without entering any PIN or password. And if you put it out of your pocket and put it on the desk, that authentication source is declining. So maybe at that point, that, okay, no, sorry, now that's maybe not exactly what I wanted to show. Actually, that's the risk curve, but it's the same for confidentiality. For the confidence, it just goes down. The same is with the risk. If we detect multiple people, and at some point there are not multiple people around you anymore, that risk is just going to decline. And depending on these measures, we could derive which authentication is probably suitable for the situation, and we could also derive if it's sufficient, the current level of security and confidence, or if you have to input something else. Yeah, and now I want to hand over to my colleague who is going to explain in more detail something about risk and, of course, a multi-device approach.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muhammad Muaaz. I'm second of the three guys. I'm second of the three guys who are working on this big project, actually. Yeah, so. Okay. So, not working at the moment. Okay. Yeah, let's get going. And nowadays we know that user owns more than one device, and these devices could be like smartwatches, mobile phones, and maybe smart glasses, even smart TVs maybe at home. So let's assume a scenario. For example, you are sitting in the office and you are logged into your PC and you are working. Suddenly you realize that you should write a text message to your friend, for example. Then you take out your mobile phone and start typing. You have to authenticate. If you are already enabled authentication on mobile device, then you have to authenticate actually. So if we look this one in a bit deeper, basically you are already authenticated on one device. And now you are also authenticating on other device which is close by. So we don't know how many times we have to do authentication again and again on multiple devices. And the other thing is like these multiple devices basically have different form factors. Like smartwatches, it's quite difficult to interpin again and again on them. So basic idea is like trusted devices which are within close proximity may share user authentication results as well as the risks that we have already mentioned in the previous slides among each other. So this would significantly reduce the number of explicit authentication processes that are necessary to perform the operations or our daily tasks, basically. Though there are some assumptions, basically, that user can only be at one place at a given time. If he is successfully authenticated to a device, basically, then user and device both are correlated. A user has physical control over the devices within arm's reach. And it also imposes some of the challenges that we will discuss a bit later, actually. So here is basically a big picture of our framework, basically. We have device 1, device 2. We can have multiple devices. We install framework on those devices. We have authentication plugins. We have risk plugins. We have like decision-making modules. So still we have, if we want to share that trust or authentication state between multiple devices, then we have to have some kind of exchange modules that allows us basically to share the trust or confidence between the devices. So if we have only single device, then we don't need that exchange module. But if we have multiple devices, then we are going to need these exchange modules. We are at the stage currently scratching our heads how we can basically find the way that we can say like device within an arm's reach are belonging to the same person. and share trust between those trusted devices only. So this Android implementation is from the developer's point of view, basically. We have Android open source implementation, which is currently work in progress, and it's kind of pretty extensible in terms of users can bring in more plugins and developers, of course, and risk plugins, and they can extend the framework. This framework already provides kind of fallback, or you can say like baseline security, and researchers can use this one for research purposes and also support the user studies, basically. We are also inviting like researchers to use and communicate, contribute to our framework. Here is what a developer or researcher has to do, basically, to insert a plugin to a framework, basically. We have like our custom permission, like register authentication plugin, and then we have the service, which is basically the framework service. We give the permissions from our application to read the authentication results. And in the next slide, we can see like this is basically what we are extending the framework service in our application. And we can publish the results, or confidence or risk, whatever kind of results we want to publish, we can publish it via this method, basically. So this is the only work that a researcher or developer has to do to bring his application like within the framework scope. So if we try to wrap up, we have like Android authentication framework, which supports at the moment like multi-modal continuous approach. Also, we are extending it towards the cross devices and making it more risk aware so that we apply security as per as the requirement of the risks, basically. And currently, we have plugin system. We have confidence calculation. In future, we are going towards like cross-device authentication fusion, securing biometrics with the template protection, because keeping those templates on mobile devices does not make them secure. If someone gets access to those templates, it would be like quite difficult to revoke those templates. So currently, we are in active development. Research is already in progress. Researchers, all industry partners are welcome to join, basically, and they can develop plugins also for that. So that's pretty much we have for CORMORANT framework. Any questions, please?
I have two questions. The first question, you said you rely on physical proximity, but actually it is an open problem actually to identify if the device is in proximity indeed, or maybe the signal is just relayed. So how you deal with this problem? And second question, did you do some measurements to estimate impact on battery life of the device?
I would like to go for the second question. Battery life still, this work is continuously in progress. It's evolving itself, basically, and we don't have like full version running on the mobile devices. We cannot say about the battery life at the moment, basically. So it's up there for the proof of concept at the moment. And for the first question, yes, it's rather difficult, basically, to say devices within the close proximity. Basically, user first has to allow the trusted devices, and then we haven't not figured out how we can say like, okay, these devices are within my arm's reach or they are very close to me. Basically, we want to basically find out some way, basically, where we can find the distance between me and my devices, actually. So these are the still open challenges.
Yes, and maybe I can extend that for one sentence. I think, as for some talks before already, the goal is not to get impenetrable security at that point, because it's just very, very, very difficult. I think it's maybe easier to think of it as combining many information sources to make it harder for attackers to really get through. So if you like measure the proximity, the more information sources we measure and include, the harder it's going to be to really fake all of them. So even if it's possible to relay them, the effort is going to be a bit higher. But at the moment, we don't have like an approach to completely disable attackers from relaying. That's right.
I have a question about, okay, the use case. I'm coming from the HCI side. And of course, it's nice if you have all your devices. Every device has an owner who has to authenticate and so on. But some devices are not merely for one person. For example, tablets. There are a lot of families who all like to watch Netflix with a family iPad or Nexus. What do you do then? Do you adjust the risk model to say, okay, this device doesn't need a high risk threat model, or would you modify the user's side that you say, okay, these 3 people can authenticate with their voice? How would you do that?
We would like to target this one by extending the profiles basically to maintaining the profile of every user that is using the current device basically. So we have to switch between the profiles.
Thank you. I'm just curious, what were the results for the gate analysis?
Gate authentication, we have I should explain like results in 2 different formats basically. Is the same day performance and the cross day performance. Same day performance, I mean like when you train your model and then you test it out on the same day or within 1 week, let's say, and the cross day is basically when you test it out after, let's say, 1 month or something like that. So in the same day, we have performance around 3 to 4% equal error rate, basically, speaking in terms of equal error rate. And in cross day, we have like 13 to 14% equal error rate for cross day performance of gate authentication. Now, equal error rate, which is basically, you can say, where the false match rate becomes equal to false non-match rates. So equal error rate is actually the point where these both false match rate and false non-match rate becomes equal.
We're still trying to figure out what the real reason for the cross-day error is. It might be shoes, it might be different clothing. So this has not been controlled for in the current study. So people who did the cross-day duration with, I think it was 20 days in between, we did not control for their clothing or their shoes. There were big differences. And we're not even yet talking about handbags, when the phone is not close to the leg.
If I might extend that for one sentence again, I think it's also important if you have like a classifier or if you have like a biometric source that is just a bit better than random decision. If you use a very big framework and very much biometric sources, you can possibly combine them like in a boosting or bagging approach to get something that is much stronger than the individual components. So on the very, very long run, we possibly include many of these sources and get a pretty accurate result. So that would also be a goal.
Any other questions? Then let's thank you again.